What's up, YouTube? Slim Reptiles here, bringing another video. And today we're going to go over what stuff that you need to do before you begin breeding for the year, or I guess if it's your first time to breed, things to consider before you actually get eggs and produce babies, and everything that you might need and stuff that you might not think about beforehand. So hopefully this helps you guys or helps somebody get ready for their first season and things that they may be able to expect. I'm trying to make this video really quick because I have a couple of things to go over, but I'm going to try to go over each thing pretty quickly. Of course, I'm joined here by my first ball python. He's a spider, just a regular spider, that's it. He's just a pet. You can see his head here if I reach up. Okay, there he goes. He's cool. Anyway, so the first thing you need to do is research your breeding season, which is potentially the most important part, also potentially the least important part. Now with captive bred reptiles, we could actually kind of control when and how we breed the reptiles. For example, breed ball pythons, we start to cool them down or do whatever, start the breeding process around November time. October, November is when most people will start cooling down, which is good to know, because the reason November or October, November is the time most people do it, because it's usually the best time to help them get ready for breeding season, for them to acknowledge with the temperature drop, and then and then as it gets nicer out, it gets warmed up, and that's how they kind of trigger their breeding cycle. Now with that being said, it's important for you to realize that, especially for your first time, to realize when the best month is, or months or seasons to start breeding reptile is. But with that being said, like I said, most people start cooling down and start the breeding process with ball pythons in October. If you really wanted to, you could do it in July and do reverse breeding season that everyone else does. It all pretty much comes down to temperature control. So if you wanted to do in July, it's a little bit harder because it's hotter outside. But what you can do is drop your hot spot temperature down a little bit, but more cooler than normal as they would, and it usually triggers their follicle growth and whatnot. So there is a way to do it. That's why it's kind of important to know when the best time is, but also not really that important, because you can kind of trigger it yourself. At least with all the species that I've worked with. I can't speak for everything. The next thing to do is to figure out what needs to be done to help your reptile grow follicles and eggs for females, and to get ready for the season so they can have healthy clutches. For ball pythons, that's pretty much just feeding them as much as possible before you cool them down. That way they know they get a lot of food, they gain the extra weight, and it helps them throughout the season. Is figure out how many eggs your reptile that you plan on breeding is going to lay, and how they're going to lay the eggs. So ball pythons, they usually lay 6 to 8 eggs average. It could be more, it could be less, but the average is 6 to 8 eggs a season. Lay them all at once, and then they're done for the season. While leopard geckos, like this guy is actually a male, but if it was a female, what he would do would a female leopard gecko, they lay 2 eggs about every 3 to 4 weeks for a couple months. So you only get 2 eggs at one time. You gotta put them in the incubator, then a month later you get 2 more eggs. So with leopard geckos, you pretty much you're getting babies hatching. Pretty much you're getting 2 babies hatching a month, every 3 or 4 weeks once they start laying eggs, which is kind of cool. All reptiles kind of lay eggs differently. Make sure you figure out how many babies you're going to end up with, which will help you, prepare in the future. You don't want to get caught with too many babies. And also have to figure out if your reptile even lays eggs. There's, I know, boas and a couple other reptiles that give live birth, so they don't even lay eggs. That's another thing to consider. This, I guess this guy pretty much is going to be for the egg-laying reptiles, but I guess it can kind of go for either way. The next is we're going to talk about the incubator. When you buy an incubator, make sure you have an incubator before you even get eggs. You never know exactly how long they could lay eggs quicker than you're expecting, and then they lay eggs, you don't have an incubator to put them in, and they will go bad. So you kind of just wasted the eggs. If you plan on breeding, you might as well have an incubator anyway. There's no reason to wait to get it. It's actually better off to get it way before you even need it, which is going to be the next reason. Next thing to consider is make sure the incubator you have can hold enough eggs that you're going to produce, which leads to the first point, to see how many eggs you're going to produce in that season regardless, and maximum. And another thing, the reason why you want to get the incubator first, because you want to keep it plugged in for another month 2 months before you even get eggs. That way you make sure the incubator is holding the correct temperatures throughout months, and it's not dipping down too low or getting too high. Make sure it's holding humidity, the power's staying on, it's working, the fan's running and everything. You'd be surprised how a faulty incubator can really mess up your plans and create a whole slew of problems. And trust me, I kind of know that from personal experience, which is a story I'll go into later. So that covers it with the incubator. Like I said, I'm going to try to go over these pretty quickly, because I don't want this video to be 500 hours long. I don't want to make 500 part video. So next thing you want to consider is figure out the cost and the investment and the estimated profits you can get from said reptiles, the male and the female. This is for the business side of it more than, I guess, the casual hobbyist breeder. As much as we don't like to talk about it, money is a big part of being a reptile breeder. You have to consider the money. You got to consider if reptiles are making you money or if they're losing money. As a business, you can't do anything that loses you money. So even though you might really want to breed a certain reptile, if it's not worth it money-wise, you might have to push it back or make that like a personal pet project you do on the side that you don't expect to make money from. And you kind of do it in your own time instead of your business reptile time, I guess. So each reptile that you buy, even though you're going to breed it and eventually possibly make a profit from it, each reptile has various costs associated with it. This is different for every reptile, but for most reptiles it's pretty much the same thing, and it's a cost that you're going to be paying for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years before you even get eggs. So you have to consider that as well. These costs include the actual cost of the reptile. For example, this guy cost me $60, I think, at the reptile show. So that's one thing, that's one issue, and usually the cost of the reptile, depending on the reptile, it's usually cheaper than the actual, cost of keeping it and housing it and caging it. Oh, you're squeezing too hard. Come on. So yeah. So anyway, the cost of another thing to consider is the cost of the enclosure or the rack or whatever you're going to be putting the reptile in. Usually, the bigger reptile you get, the more expensive that is going to be. You gotta keep in mind of the cost of the heat source. You gotta buy heat pads, heat pad, heat tape, thermostats, all that cost that goes into it, and making sure your reptile isn't too cold, as well as making sure your thermostat doesn't get, or your heat mat doesn't get too hot. To think of how much it's going to cost to feed a reptile, and that can kind of catch up on you, I guess you could say. So for example, at my pet store, I think it's $5 for a medium to large rat, which is what I usually feed the adult ball pythons, which isn't bad. $5, $6 a week to feed something is really cheap. About how much it costs to feed ourselves every day, definitely more than $6 a day, let alone a week. But once you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ball pythons, that price can add up really quick each week. You could also buy in bulk, but then you need a place of storage, which is also another cost, and I'm not even gonna get into that. Another cost you need to, I'm going to kind of just go over these real quick and kind of list them off, is the cost of substrate. How much is the substrate going to cost you? The cost of any vet visit that might be needed. So the energy bills to run the heat tape, the heat mat, the thermostats, the lights, on whatever else that you need to keep your reptiles thriving. Cost of any hides, decorations, wood pieces, logs, whatever you buy. It all adds up, especially if you have multiple reptiles. So it's all the kind of costs to kind of consider before you even start to think about breeding reptiles. Because like I said, all that cost is going to keep happening without you getting money back from that reptile for at least 3 years, depending on what reptile it is, male, female, whatnot. And for the cost, like I said, this is for each and every reptile, not just for your whole collections. You got to consider the cost of food and enclosures and everything for every single reptile, which is a lot of people don't realize. They think, oh, I have ball pythons, I'm going to keep 10 ball pythons and it's going to be the same price and time and effort as one, which is definitely not true, for sure. Another thing you want to consider is to figure out a budget before you start buying animals to breed. Figure out how much money you have to buy reptiles without screwing yourself over. Figure out which reptiles you're going to breed, what species, what certain morphs. So you want to figure out all the money part before, so you don't screw yourself, because like I said in the previous part, there's a lot of costs, and especially unexpected costs like the vet visits, that you need to have money for. So make sure you kind of budget your money, so you have money for the reptiles, you have money for the care of the reptiles and the food, and any vet visits that you may need. You do that per reptile, because like I said, you might have 8-ball pythons, everything might be fine, and next thing you know, next week one has a reptile or a respiratory infection, and all of them do, and that's a vet visit for each reptile, and there goes that cost. So you got to make sure you have money backed up just in case something goes wrong when the health of the animal is at risk. That's part of owning the responsibility of owning a reptile. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching part 1, and keep your eyes out for part 2, which should be uploaded right away. And if you're watching this more than likely it's already out, so check that out, and hopefully this video helped, and the next upcoming videos also help. Thanks guys so much for watching, especially if you watched it all the way to the end. Appreciate you guys, and have a good one.